premier candidates, as he put it, and the Green Party is represented by Jason Sol, Khoisan Revolution Party by Cornelius Peterson. Welcome to you all, gentlemen, and I do emphasize, gentlemen, that the women are out there jogging, sweating off the big stuff, while the gentlemen are here putting a face to the policies. I'm hoping that you'll tell us a little bit more about your representativity. But let's tell you about the population of the Western Cape. So we're talking about 6.6 million people, 11.5% of the national population, and they do contribute 13.7% of the national GDP, with social grants recipients numbering 1.5 million. But of course, more than 20 years after the end of apartheid, Cape Town is still a radically divided city. These are just some of the areas where remarkable transformation is lacking, and that is, of course, we're talking about land, the economy, employment. We'll tell you about other issues as well. But let's first ask the parties what their thoughts are, and more specifically, who do you represent, as in whose voice do you represent here in the Western Cape tonight? Let's start with Al-Jama'a Khanif Hendricks. Your 2 minutes starts now.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, and assalamu alaikum to all the panelists and the listeners. Al-Jama'a represents the only learner command in South Africa which represents nearly 100,000 high school students. But we are a Muslim party, and we formed the Muslim party to get Muslims to play a more active role in the political life of the country. So we are a Muslim party for all communities, and we are also the ears and eyes of the environmentalists who are looking to Al-Jama'a to stop the pollution of waterways by sewage and by chemical poisoning. So that's largely our constituency. And lastly, our constituency are those who want to prevent the Western Cape especially from becoming the drunk capital of South Africa.
Well, that's Al-Jama'a. Let's hear now from once the governing ANC, and Ibrahim Rasool, you're representing your party. Whose voice do you speak on behalf of? Your 2 minutes starts now.
No, thank you very much. I think that the African National Congress is founded on the basis of the Freedom Charter that says that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, black and white. And particularly in the Western Cape, black is more than just African. It includes all people of color, including those who call themselves coloreds, all religions, and certainly all ethnicities and national groups. So that's who we are. And even if there are communities that find it difficult to vote for us, the ANC still has the responsibility to govern in a way that includes them. Because for us, a binary South Africa does not work. I think that certainly our large voting base would be the very poor in the squatter camps of the townships, in the backyards of the colored areas, and also I think enough of the middle class who require a stable ANC, a majority strong ANC, in order for it to be able to govern effectively and not look over its shoulder. And so we have to walk that very fine line between managing the persistence of privilege on our right and populism on our left. And that middle path is what makes the ANC a central party to hold the nation together and to see to the needs of all people, whether they vote for us or not, whether they are our natural base or not. But certainly I think that we do represent a lot of the aspirations of the very poor, those requiring houses, those requiring services, those requiring jobs, those requiring a whole range of social grants and pensions and so forth. And so that really is the makeup of the ANC.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rasool. So let's find out now from the BLF's Mawanda Jama, what are you offering the people of the Western Cape, and whose voice do you speak on behalf of? Your time starts now.
Thank you. BLF, Black First, Land First, we representing only black people. When we've seen that there's a need for a political one of someone to need to stand up for black people in so many cases. Black people, they are the majority in this country, and black people, they are the people who are suffering the most in this country. We've seen that in public hospitals, black people, the public hospitals, there's no care in public hospitals. There's no care in the service of the public hospitals. Most of the people that goes to those hospitals is black people. The black people are being fired in the companies that are owned by, most of the companies are owned by white people in this country. Black people are suffering there at home, so we are representing them also in the issue of land. Black people, they don't do farming. We need them to do farming in a bigger scale. That means in farming they must have farms and like any other people in this country. So for the past 20-25 years, black people have been suffering. They suffered for more than 300 years under apartheid. They are still suffering at this time. So there's a reason why, that's a reason why BLF decided that they will stand up for only black people, so that they can close the gap between white people and black people in this country, so that we leave the what Mandela was saying, that people must be equal in this country.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jama. Your time was just about up. Let's move on to the Cape Party now. Jack Miller, what are your thoughts and what are you saying to the people of the Western Cape? On whose behalf are you speaking, or would you like to speak on behalf?
Thank you.
Your time starts now.
Thank you very much. Yeah, the hint's in the name. The Cape Party represents all the people of the Western Cape. And to that I would like to ask a question to the people of the Western Cape. Are you happy with the state of the economy and politics in this country? If your answer is no, then the Cape Party has a quote for you. The definition of insanity is to do the same thing over and over again and to expect a different result. The Cape Party has a fundamentally different message to the political parties that have been governing us for 25 years. The Cape Party is saying we want greater political and economic autonomy for the Western Cape. If the ruling government of the ANC and the DA will not negotiate with us on that basis, we will ask you, the people of the Western Cape, to vote in a referendum whether we should pursue self-determination. If we get a majority in that referendum under your vote, we will declare the Western Cape an independent country, the Cape Republic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Miller. And let's hear from John Steenhuisen, the governing party in the Western Cape. Are the people of the Western Cape insane to keep voting you into power, as suggested by Mr. Miller there? And who are those people that you represent here in the Western Cape? Your time starts now.
Vote the DA out of office here in the Western Cape. What we have is a record of action and a promise of more. Over the course of the last 10 years that the DA has governed here, we've grown employment by 24%. We've provided over 200,000 housing opportunities. We've been able to grow the economy. We've been able to get South Africans working again. And even in spite of the very difficult macroeconomic situation we find ourselves in as a result of national government policies, we've been able to grow the economy and get people working again. 83% of the budget in this province is spent on poor South African households in the Western Cape. This is a record that we're very proud of, but obviously we've got a lot more to do, and what we're seeking from the voters of the Western Cape is to look at what we've been able to do, to make an assessment on, is this a government that's really put you first? Is this a government that's delivered? Is this a government that cares about the Western Cape and where its future lies, and to get behind us? We've got to come together. We represent all South Africans, all 6.6 million people of the Western Cape, particularly those who put us back into office, particularly those who share our values of freedom, fairness and opportunity, and particularly those who believe that we've got to build one South Africa if we're going to advance ourselves. We've got to come together or we're going to come apart, and that is the bottom line. We go into this election with this record of achievement, and we put it before the people of the Western Cape and say to them, trust us for another 5 years. We've done great things. We're going to do even greater things for this province.
All right, thank you very much, John Steenhuisen. And let's move on now to the Green Party. Jason Soul, on whose behalf do you speak, especially here tonight in the Western Cape?
The Green Party speaks on behalf of all the people of the Western Cape, but most importantly, all the people of South Africa. And I also think that the Green Party speaks on behalf of your children, and it speaks on behalf of your children as yet unborn. The Green Party basically is taking cognizance of the environmental destruction that is not only occurring right here in South Africa, but globally, where we see ecosystems being corroded. We have a gathering cloud of climate change that is looming above us, and there is not a single party sitting here right now that is taking any action in any way outside of minuscule swipes at trying to correct what is ultimately going to be a catastrophic problem. The Green Party also stands for the rights of animals. The Green Party stands for the rights of your nutrition and your health by changing the things that we eat. The Green Party stands for your right to drink fresh, clean water and swim in oceans that is free from toxins and sewage that is currently being pumped out right here in Cape Town. The Green Party stands for your right to walk on a beach and not see sewage washed up on the shore, pick up E. coli bacterial infections. The Green Party stands for the right of the soil, the earth that the Black Land First wants to occupy. They want to detoxify it. We want to remove the chemicals from it. We want to restore it so that it can once again blossom and sustain health. The Green Party stands for the animals that are currently being destroyed, lions being shot out, elephants. You know, your great-grandchildren will one day have to ask you what an elephant actually was. There is nothing that has been done in this country that is preserving the ecosystems of this country, and the Green Party...
And your time is up, Mr. Sola. And I must say you have an unfair advantage. The seagulls here, we said no audience seem to be giving you support. But let's move on to...
Want heat, not support.
The Khoisan Revolution Party, Cornelius Peterson. Other than what's obvious in the name of the party, who are you giving voice to tonight? Your 2 minutes starts now.
Thank you for the opportunity. It's nice sharing a platform of the giants political parties in South Africa, but we acknowledge that not all of us can do great things, but we can do small things that can become great with all the great love that we are having. Let me clarify one thing about Khoisan Revolution, because there's a perception that we only represent Khoi and San people. By our character, yes, we are an indigenous party, but by definition, we represent all those who are born in South Africa as indigenous. We actually also represent the voiceless. We represent those people who has been stripped from their identities, from their culture, from their heritage. We represent those people whose intellectual property has been exploited by by capitalists and national what do we call it, the national foreign national companies. We actually represent the voiceless, the undecided voters. We are a party which are fed up for slogans and buzzwords. We represent those voters.
Okay, so let's get into the debate section of the conversation tonight, and I would like to start with the DA, because the accusation has been made towards your party, Mr. Steenhuisen. Does the DA have a problem with the smaller parties? And I'm going to give you a minute to respond. Your time starts now.
No, of course we don't have a problem with smaller parties. So we live in a multi-party democracy. It's something which our constitution entrenches.
The Cape Party has accused you of sending out SMSs telling the people of the Western Cape to not vote for the smaller parties because it'll be a waste of time to vote for the smaller parties. What is your response to that?
Well, this is politics, and you can't be a sailor that curses the sea. We're in an election campaign. We're out there fighting for votes. parties adopt their own strategies. They've got their own ways of communicating with voters and getting their message out there. I think our message there is very clear, that if you want a real bulwark against ANC hegemony in this country, if you want a real party that's able to stand up against the bad policy decisions, against the confusion, against state capture, then you need to make a party very strong so it's able to challenge for that particular centre in South African politics. That's a clear Boysa message, that if you want to stop the ANC, then there's only one party that really has the might, has the people and has the policies to do so, and that's the DA.
So let's come to the Cape Party. So Mr. Steenhuisen here saying it's just a simple matter of who's up to the task, that there's no politicking or bad tactics as you've accused them of. What's your response to that then? Is he lying? Is the DA lying?
Well, look, I've got tremendous respect for John Steenhuisen, but unfortunately he works for a political party that uses underhanded means to try and discredit the credits of parties like the Cape Party. Now, it's an outright lie that you need to vote DA to keep the ANC or the EFF out. We've got a fantastic electoral system which works on proportional representation. Now, the DA has been in power. We've had 25 years of the same political parties as I mentioned earlier. The DA has been in autocratic power for the last decade. No one has been able to hold them to account. They say they want to hold the ANC to account on a national level. Well, we want to hold the DA to account on a provincial level. The best thing that voters can do is drive the DA under 50%. That does not mean the ANC will get in. What that means is if we can get the DA to 40, 45%, let's assume the Cape Party gets 5, 10%, we will then be able to negotiate with the DA and say, listen, we have these problems. If you do not take the needs of the people of the Western Cape seriously, if you do not put forward referendums on these specific issues, then we will not give you the mandate to rule.
So the time's up. Let's come to Al-Jamaa, because the question really is, if it is indeed true that it's a waste of time to vote for the other smaller political parties because it won't make a dent on and more importantly, the physical and structural landscape of the Western Cape, as I mentioned, remains unchanged. Does it make sense then to continue to vote for the Democratic Alliance? I'll start with Al-Jamaa. I'll give you your minute now.
Yeah, no, it's a disaster to vote for the DA after they failed the Western Cape for so many decades. And Al-Jamaa is quite keen in the Western Cape to have the balance of power. It is possible for us to get the balance of power if our constituency votes for us and the youth votes for us and the women vote for us, because we in the Western Cape 70% of our candidates are women. As far as the land question is concerned, our party, and I need more time for this, we feel that it is anti-revolutionary to compensate land without compensation. Our position is that reparations must be paid for those who benefit from the land. And our position is also that the land belongs to the First Nation,
so we'll come to the issue of the
Khoi
land.
Black.
We'll come to the issue of the land
because
policy
you mentioned
in just
that, so
a
that's
moment.
why I thought I had to
it
respond
is
to
naturally part of the discussion, but I just wanted you to answer the question whether or not it would make sense.
No, my question is, the sooner we get rid of the DA, the better.
Okay, so let's come to you, Mr. Rasool, because we are talking about the landscape, and we saw protests in Luande today, and the DA at some point accused the ANC of being behind the recent protests, including what we saw in Khayelitsha and Somerset. How do you respond to that? Because the people there are complaining about this unequal allocation of resources. They're talking about a lack of water, a lack of land, and that's why I understand why Al-Jamaa is saying they have to talk about land, because it is all part of this unchanged or landscape that remains the same, that remains segregated. So let's give you your minute now, Mr. Rasool.
Look, I think that the DA is just following on from the apartheid playbook, that any protest must have an agitator. And so what they need to understand is that if you raise water tariffs by up to 600%, there will be unhappiness. If you sell off a Tafelberg school when you could have had social housing in Sea Point, that it will lead to protest. If you stand behind the eviction of farm workers in the Western Cape and don't support the farm workers themselves, then there will be room for protest. If you don't spend 2.1 billion of your urban settlement development grant for housing, people who are homeless will stand up. So you can look for agitators like P.W. Botha did.
Are you looking for agitators as the ANC, though?
What was that?
Are you looking for agitators
No.
as the ANC?
I think the DA is looking for agitators. What I think the ANC is doing is to try and channel all that anger into a political system. We are taking the water issues to a class action in the High Court of Cape Town so that we channel people's discontent and not let it simmer on the ground and lead to the kind of violence that the Western Cape does not need.
Okay, so let's come to BLF. You mentioned earlier on that you only represent or want to represent black people. So the Western Cape, as Mr. Rasool said, has all different types of black people. And these are people who are also disgruntled about the uneven nature of the access to resources, the development in different places, some which are seen to be more affluent than others, even though they're said to have black people there. Why would you only want to represent a portion of the community? Let's start now, Mr. Man.
Thank you. Black people, I believe in this country, when we talk about black people, we are talking about coloureds, we're talking about Indians, we're talking about a group of those people that fall under the black community. So we represent all those people, and because we call them, they are called in this country black people, so we represent them. And the need for, as you mentioned, that these people, there are things that are suffering from in health, the health care system is not good in their areas, the hospitals. That's why we say as BLF that the president, whoever will become a president in this country, must a president, the ministers, and going down to the mayors, those people must go with their families must use actually the public services, e.g. a public hospital, so that the service of the public hospital can improve. The people that go mostly to those hospitals is black people. And they don't have means or money to use private hospitals.
So your time is up. And I know I start with both Cape Party and the DA, so I'm going to skip you and come back to you in another round of questions. But I want to find out, how do you see the socio-economic legacy of apartheid, Green Party, being alleviated to redress these wrongs that are being highlighted? Cape Town is said to be amongst the 10 most unequal metropolis in this country.
So the big problem here is that everybody is fighting over the same bone. And everybody is trying to take a bite of a bone that is almost bare on its own. You know, it's got very little meat on it. The objective is to expand the economy, to create more, not to transfer wealth from one group to another group, but to actually expand the economy and to create worthwhile kind of functional careers that people can live in, enjoy, and earn an income in. It's not really that difficult. If you consider the amount of work that actually has to be put into Cape Town, minor alterations and some major alterations that can be done in the way that we currently run our economy here would bring about a huge number of jobs that people would be able to participate in, and it would create an economy that is not currently, being fought over by a few minorities and a majority that wants a bite of the same bone. So it's really just a question of expanding what our economy is actually doing here. And it's really not difficult to do, by creating a sense of...
And unfortunately, your time is up. Let me then find out from the Khoisan Party. The DA says there's an undeniable level of integration in areas across the city, and that also includes investment in public transport. So that means that the lives of people are being bettered. So it means that it's rubbishing the claim that this is a segregated city. What is your response to that?
I hardly can hear you. Can you repeat yourself again?
So the DA is rubbishing the claims that this is a segregated city. It's saying that there's been a great deal of investment in integrating the city, including resources, improving transport infrastructure. And I'm asking if your party agrees with that.
No, we can't agree with that. If you look into the situation currently, especially with the taxi violences, with regard to that, it quietly seems that the DA haven't got a plan, a proactive plan how to deal with this matter. I think perhaps also the DA confine their activities only to the metros, and that is basically our problem as well. If you go out to the rural areas, you find more challenges than we get in the metros, and that is basically why we said that we're going out there and actually represent those people at the outskirts of the metro as well.
Okay, so then let me come back to the DA and ask this question. You say more than 80% of your budget goes to poor people. Why is it that there is no immediate agreement from the smaller parties or the parties represented here, and indeed the people of the Western Cape, who go to the streets, who occupy land, who accuse you of penalizing the poor when it comes to higher rates in terms of water services and other services, of neglecting them when it comes to protecting them from crime? Your minute starts now.
Well, I think that it's a false narrative, and I think it needs to be addressed because it's the third time it's now been said. The reality is that Cape Town is the least unequal metro in the country, and that's been verified by Africa Check. The most unequal metro in the country is actually Buffalo City, which is ANC run. There's no metro in the country that's doing more to overcome the legacy of apartheid spatial planning. That's why the city has got on the go at the moment a number of projects to bring people with inclusionary housing closer to the city. The Conradi project, the Somerset project, the Salt River project, creating housing opportunities closer to the city so that we can overcome the apartheid era spatial planning. But what I don't buy is this complete narrative that this is a Western Cape or Cape Town problem. This is a national problem that we have. And ANC-run municipalities are far behind the DA in trying to integrate these cities and these communities to overcome that legacy of apartheid. In terms of safety and security, I think it must also be made very clear where the responsibility for policing lies. That is a national competence. Okay. And I think it is an outrage that the police to population ratio here is so poor because of the national government's failure to provide enough police officers in this province.
Hold the thought. We have to take a commercial break, and I want to come back to that issue in just a moment. To watching a live broadcast election debate here from Sea Point at the SABC studios, well, in fact, outside of the SABC studios, debating a number of issues with the 7 political parties. We'll take a quick break and we'll return.
We do not just speak, we let every voice in our nation find full expression in language and in culture. We do not just teach, we empower all people with education. We do not just bring you the news, we place you where the news is happening. We do not just entertain, we take you on journeys. We do not just broadcast sport, we create an arena for sporting heroes to inspire you. Ours is not just a job, it's a calling to ensure that everyone in our nation is informed, educated, and entertained. We're able to do this because you do your part. SABC TV licenses. It's all made possible by you.
Please, short, sharp, don't tell us stories. Just get to the question. Just hold on. Just hold on. Please hold on. Please hold on.
People
Please
who
hold
do
on.
these sort of things.
So, but we'll get to the floor. We'll get you an opportunity to ask these questions and interrogate these leaders. The people are saying you are talking, and it's all rhetoric at the moment, but there doesn't seem to be any action to back that up.
In All You Need Is Love.
It's all about celebrating those good things in life, like caring, sharing, and love. And on top of that,
real life drama, real love, real stories, and real people.
Why did he have to punish me because of what my mom did?
Just want to correct something.
Like, yeah, uthanda my girlfriend.
I would be happy if they could renew the vows.
We're on a mission.
Okay.
Thina mathamba kunawalahla ngale ndaba le. Ayakhombisa.
It is said that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. It is the same with love. Wherever your relationship is, don't be afraid to take the first step.
Happiness is at stake, and I'm glad that you've made something out of it.
True love doesn't just happen right away. It develops after you've gone through many ups and downs. On DSTV channel 156, SABC Encore, Timeless.
Well, welcome back. You're watching a live debate, election debate here from the Western Cape, specifically Sea Point. A bit nippy, I must say, that we are braving the cold weather, but we are having, hopefully in a minute or two, a more heated discussion as it was heating up before we went to the break. John Steenhuisen of the DA saying that it's unfair to say that there is unfair allocation of resources, especially when it comes to policing here in the Western Cape, especially because it is a national prerogative. And we are introducing you to the parties once again: Al Jamaa, ANC, BLF, Cape Party, DA, Green Party, and the Khoisan Party. So I'll come back to the ANC on this one, on your door-to-door campaign, and I will come back to the issue of policing, but I want to look at the general allocation of resources. You accused the DA of pocketing something in the region of 1 billion rand off the water crisis caused by the drought here in the Western Cape. How do you justify that?
Look, I think the point that we make, and it's true, is that the DA administration has made a surplus of 1 billion rand out of a water shortage in the Western Cape by raising tariffs. We, in fact, underestimated that, because when Moody's looked at the city, they in fact said that it was 4.4 billion. Now, what we are saying is that that is money that should be used, firstly, to lower the tariff significantly, secondly, to scratch arrears that people have, some as high as 10,000, 100,000, 80,000, and so forth. One woman who's a litigant actually has a significant one of almost 1 million arrears. And then I think that we need to have that 1 billion or 4.4 billion redistributed for relief amongst those who are suffering out of the water crisis.
Has that been your finding, that low-income households have been targeted by the city?
It has been, and especially during Ramadan, and we're having Ramadan again, and I'm glad, you know, that the fake news about you know, the water crisis, you know, is behind us. We have found that.
What do you mean the fake news? Was it something that
Yes, it was fake, and when the DA announced day zero, we immediately wrote to the president, who was in Davos, and we told him, please stop this fake nonsense. And the president wrote back from Davos to tell us, yes, he will give it his immediate attention. And now we've been proved correct that the whole issue about day zero is the fake news of the century, and that will cost the DA a lot of votes. That's why I say it's haram to vote for the DA.
BLF, what is your response to that? Those 600% increase in water tariffs, is that figure correct? Has there been an investigation by your party into that, and was it indeed fake?
What we find out recently, I'll start by saying today there were a protest about this same issue, and we tried to engage to the people and try to find out what was the issue, and then they mentioned that there's these water tariffs that are happening, and they feel that the target it's mainly them, I would say the people that they always call poor people, which is black people. So yes, we did. We are doing our investigation on that currently. We didn't do it, but we are doing it on
okay.
one topic.
So let me hear from the Cape Party. You are saying, suggesting that you want a referendum for pretty much for the Western Cape to secede. Are these part of the reasons, and what would you base it on? Are you saying that people shouldn't pay for services?
No, but let's talk about these services. Absolutely. The water, I have to agree with the panel on the DA's incompetence when it came to this water issue. In addition to that, we need to talk about electricity, and we need to talk about property rates. Property rates in the last 4 years have gone up. The values of property have gone up 34%. The tax, the rates from the DA have gone up 98%. 3 times the value.
In which areas is that concentrated?
All over Cape Town. What I have personal family members that have had a lady had to sell her house because she could not afford the rates. You don't own your house in Cape Town, you rent it from the DA. And one of our biggest issues is the Division of Revenue Act. And this is why we want greater autonomy for the Western Cape, because we pay in 200 billion rand in taxes every year, and we get back a mere 50 billion rand. And one of the reasons we believe the DA has to tax us to death is because we're losing so much money. Why does the DA allow the Division of Revenue Act to rob the Western Cape of 4 times our revenue? If the Cape Party was in government, we would put an end to this and be 4 times wealthier tomorrow.
Let's hear from the DA. How do you go from charging residents something like 4 rand for 6 kilolitres of water to 24.37 for 0.6 kilolitres of water?
Because we actually were faced with the water crisis, and I really reject the argument that this was fake news. And it's when you say things like this are fake news that you end up like where I was this week in Limpopo, in 3 municipalities run by the ANC that are about to run out of water. The dams are sitting at 10%. So yes, we were faced with a crisis in the Western Cape, and we had to deal with it because we were let down by national government that should.
Were you targeting poorer households?
No, we're not targeting poorer households at all. In fact, if you look at the free package of basic services, water, electricity and refuse removal, the Western Cape has the highest number of households receiving those packages of free basic services. So it's simply not true that we're targeting the poor. If through our lifeline tariffs, poor households are subsidized, and that's why we have to make sure we are able to collect rates and be able to collect money so that we can start to address the inequalities that exist. You can't do it without money. Cities raise money through municipal rates, and frankly, if we weren't able to raise that money, there's very little we could do to start dealing with the backlog,
but you're said
particularly
to be doing
for poor
so
households.
Exorbitantly.
I don't think they're exorbitant if you look at them compared to other cities. So take the eThekwini Metro, our free package of basic services here in the city of Cape Town is far better and a far better uptake.
Okay, well, let's
if
hear
you look
from
at
the Green Party. Do you agree with
the rates across municipalities and compare like with like, you'll see there's good value for money still in the city of Cape Town.
Green Party, would you agree that with what Mr. Steenhuisen is saying?
I'd just like to say something that it's quite funny that we're sitting here talking about water and a water crisis. What you're actually seeing is a macro environmental event that is going to become more frequent. You can already see it rippling throughout the country. You can see it in Australia. You can see it happening all over the world.
So that means you would agree with what Mr.
But I'll
Steenhuisen is saying?
take it one step further. Sorry, I'll come back to that. We actually went to the dams as the Green Party, but also as Mother Channel. And we actually took water samples from the dams. We measured their levels. We were there. I was physically there myself. We actually broadcast from there. There is not a chance on earth that it was fake news. And if you think that's fake news and you're going to call it fake news, then just prepare for many, many instances of fake news in the future, as we do absolutely nothing about macro climatic events. And in terms of the way that the DA has kind of handled this water crisis, my biggest argument with them is, well, first of all, our main argument is that we shouldn't actually be plumbing water back into the ocean. We should be reticulating our supply. And at the same time, if you are going to start desalinating the ocean, use technologies that can be run on renewables, so you don't have to apply an ongoing cost to the consumer, which is why everyone's freaking out here. They're getting much larger bills perpetually. And my final thing to this is that draining a water aquifer is not a solution to a long-term problem. The replenishment rate of an aquifer is far longer than what you're currently getting from the environment.
Let me hear from the Khoisan Party. Do you know of an indigent allowance for water for resident in poor areas?
We are not aware of any indigent allowances within the city. Although we would also like to take up another thing, which I mentioned in my introduction, is the fact that the DA is actually exploiting the indigenous electoral property without incentives. That is another thing that we're facing with. I mean, capitalists, when they come, in fact, the internationals, when they come here in the Western Cape, they normally went to heritage sites, visiting those sites, and in fact the DA is having about 1.6 billion US dollars out of these tourists without giving any incentives to the indigenous people.
So, Mr. Steenhuisen, the indigent allowance, which you say something like 60 or 80% of poor people are beneficiaries of, the Khoisan Party says they're unaware of. So who is the beneficiary of that?
It's poor households who qualify for what are called lifeline tariffs from the municipality, and it's funded from a cross-subsidization of people who are paying higher tariffs for water and are paying higher property rates. It is the right thing to do. It is important that we ensure that...
So how many people are aware of it? I'm just trying to establish why, if the Khoisan Party says they're unaware of it, and I don't know about the other...
I think that if you go onto any website of the city, if you go into the websites of any of the municipalities in the Western Cape, if you go onto the provincial government website, those lifeline packages are made available. It is a matter of public record, and in fact we receive recognition on an annual basis from the national government for the excellent work we're doing in extending these basic services to poor households to make sure that they're able to live with dignity.
So the Khoisan Party wants to respond to that, and we'll move on to another issue. You can go ahead.
If that is true, why is it that people in Elsies River, Bondia will receive accounts of 100,000 rands? I mean, they do have accounts of 100,000 rands and more. So if that is true, why do they receive those kind of accounts?
Mr. Russell, yes, we'll come back.
No, look, I think that what we are sitting with is not an integrated city. I was in Guguletu. Sewage, as well as in George, sewage is seeping from broken pipes that have not been maintained. If you go to Delft, where we took the president a few weeks ago, the dirt on the streets are not collected. It's not. Meanwhile, bicycle lanes are being constructed in Constantia. We are having re-tarring happening in Pinelands, and there are no roads in places like Slangenrivier. And so the fact of the matter is that it's one thing to say this is a little bit more equal than Buffalo City, but the fact of the matter is that our inequality is color-coded. If you happen to be white, you have a high level of services and income. If you happen to be African, you've got a very low level. And that, I think, is the fact. Blue toilets in the places like Rosedale and George are the order of the day, and they're overflowing and they're causing health hazards.
Okay, very quickly, Mr. Stenhuisen, and we
But
come back
I think
to
it's
behavior.
completely hypocritical of Mr. Rasool to hold the DA to a standard to which he's not prepared to hold his own party accountable. I can tell him countless of stories being in 6 or 7 other provinces where there's sewage running through. People don't even have waterborne sewage because their governments haven't been able to deliver. This is a government that is in the process of overcoming apartheid, spatial planning and inequality. It's not going to be done overnight. It is going to take some time. Are we there yet? No. But have we made more progress than any other city in this country? It is absolutely true that this province and this city are light years ahead of anything that Mr. Rasool's party is able to put on the table.
We're going to have to move ahead. Mr. Dama, we'll give you a quick opportunity. Yes. All right, you've got the mic.
Yeah, look, I agree with Mr. Steenhuisen there. But the problem is what the DA is doing is they're comparing rotten apples with rotten pears. Yes, we do not want an ANC government here in the Western Cape, but we certainly cannot continue with the type of DA government we've had for the last decade. This has to change, and the issues that are being raised are absolutely correct, and the DA has not done it. If they fight the Division of Revenue Act and get 4 times more money back, then we can start to fix these problems.
Mr. Jama, very quickly, and then we'll move on to our next issue.
We as PLF, we believe that water is a human right. We believe that house is a human right. We believe that electricity is a human right. So when we talk about water now, there's these tariffs that are going up and up. We have thousands and millions of black people that are not working. They cannot afford them. So we decided, we as PLF, we say water must be free to the people. There must be no charge. They must be free.
So we spoke about the fact that the dynamics in terms of race and space have barely changed. But I want to talk about whether or not areas such as Woodstock, Rondebosch East, Pinelands and Kensington present a different view as has been claimed. When we've seen upward mobility of black middle class, has that translated into better jobs? Does that translate in their being able to afford better houses? Aljama, what has your experience been? Is there overall improvement of the quality of life of Western Cape blacks, or whether you call them minorities or majorities, depending on the area that you're looking at?
Yeah, our experience is that there has been upward mobility of so-called Africans, and the colours in the Western Cape are worse off under ANC rule and now under DA rule in the Western Cape, especially because all the jobs does not go to the so-called coloured and Malay and Muslim community.
Why do you
it
think
goes
that
to
is?
the
Is it patronage?
Africans to get their vote, so the DA can further entrench themselves. So the coloured community in the Western Cape is the Cinderella that it has always been for the last 50 years.
Mr. Rasool, you are of the former governing ANC in the Western Cape. How do you respond to that charge? Are the politics of patronage, meaning that we have seen the Western Cape coloured community worse off and further polarised?
No, I think that what we are having is that certainly all the stats show that from where the ANC left this province in 2009, we have seen a decline for all people of colour. I think we left here a growth rate of 5.8%. It's now 0.8% in the Western Cape. An unemployment rate of 18% has now become 23%. And they're across the colour lines. We have had safety officers like Bambananis, 20,000 of them. Today there's nothing, and our communities are less safe. We have even had the only trauma emergency hospital in Cape Town, the GF Joost Hospital, closed by the DA, and that was playing an important role. And so what I can say is that there has been a collective decline in the life standards of people. The
So
only thing that we mustn't have is one party trying to find ways to say this group is better off than that group, when all blacks are finding life difficult. Construction industry has by and large collapsed because 2.1 billion housing budget is being not spent.
Mr. Jama, I'll come to you, but I see Mr. Steenhuisen here itching to come in on that. Is it because you're responding to
Yes, I'm responding completely because this is rank hypocrisy. It's Mr. Rasool's ANC that's trying to force a national demographic onto the police in the Western Cape, onto the health services in the Western Cape, onto correctional services in the Western Cape, that would see coloured South Africans being pushed out of work as the national demographic is applied provincially. It's only the DA that's been resisting this in court and in every forum that we can.
Resisting it in court, you're talking about a court judgment which has found that the Western Cape Police Department has allocated resources unfairly and disadvantaged black community. Are you referring
again,
to
that's
that?
Mr. Rasool must account for that. His party's in charge of the SAPS nationally.
No, the DA has spent the last 5 years calling for the army to be brought in and not calling for the reform of the police. It is now the president who has launched the anti-gang unit in the Western Cape.
That's not true. They closed the gang unit 10 years ago. If we'd had the gang unit still going, we would be far more advanced in the fight against gangsterism.
But why
the truth
have
of
you
the matter
not
is that this
implemented
national
that?
government has deprived the people of the Western Cape, and the worst police to population ratios are actually in Gugulethu and in Yanga, where we actually need more police officers there. It's this national government that has neglected the policing in the Western Cape. They've got a lot to answer for.
Simply because 20,000
It is an ANC problem.
Places like Gugulethu and Khayelitsha, and it was summarily closed.
Bambanani was a patronage project of the ANC. It was under the former MEC.
So you make communities less safe because you have suspicions about patronage.
Policy. It was a complete patronage setup being used to fund ANC branch members.
As the so-called new kid on the block, what is your assessment of this? As we mentioned, that the Western Cape Police Department is appealing the matter in court. The findings saying that black communities have been adversely disadvantaged by the allocation of resources, especially when it comes to their safety. Mr. Steenhuisen here says it's a legacy of not only the national government but of the ANC government in the past. What's your sense of that?
On our side as Black First Land First, we say there is a huge difference between whites and blacks in this in Cape Town and in the Western Cape, the whole Western Cape. If you go to the places where white people stay, mostly you'll find that there's police, there's security. I'll make an example of Sunset Beach. There's security that is always going around there. There's police that goes around there. If you need police, they will jump. They are there. So there is a huge difference between blacks and whites. Even in hospital that we are talking about, this is the reason why Black First Land First saying that the president, the ministers, premiers must use these. If public hospitals are good for the people who are voting for the president, then it's good for the president and his family himself. So these things will, we believe that will close a gap by giving black people an opportunity.
All right, let's go to Mr. Miller and we'll come to the Khoisan party. So, Mr. Miller, you say you're a party that represents all South Africans. How would you deal with this particular issue? I spoke about research that shows that even though there has been development to certain areas, it hasn't exactly translated or filtered down to the people that need it the most. Your response to that?
Sorry, is it Khoisan?
To you, Mr. Miller, you can go ahead. We'll give it to you.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, you know, what's so frustrating is this type of conversation we're having, and we've been having it for 25 years. In fact, no, it was good in the beginning. We spoke about a rainbow nation where everyone is equal in this country. Now it's all about black, black, black. And then sometimes you're the right shade of black. Other times you're the wrong shade of black. Here in the Cape, the majority population, the coloured population, we've done a lot of work in Mitchell's Plain, places like Delft, Lavender Hill. Hulle sê ons was tweede klas burgers. No, is ons derde klas burgers. This BE is destroying the
fabric. So you agree with the sentiment that the coloured community in the Western Cape is being left behind?
Absolutely. Okay. Absolutely. 100%.
Let's hear from the Green Party and then we'll hear from the Khoisan Party as well. You can go ahead.
Crime and specifically policing is a massive issue. But I just want to say that, no matter what color you are, everybody is living in fear. Crime is a massive issue nationwide. And it doesn't take on racial kind of boundaries. It doesn't mean because of the color of my ethnicity that somehow I'm
but isn't
preferentially
that the
treated.
lived reality of people in the Western Cape? It's
We
not
all
a question
experience
about
the same
whether it's
reality.
ideological. Do you really? Do people in Khayelitsha experience
Can
the
you
same
really
level
compare?
of safety?
Can you compare a person's kind of subjective viewpoint of crime? We all experience crime. We all have children that we're afraid for.
Okay.
The worst part is this, and I just want to say this, is that the majority of crime is based around socio-economic conditions. People have no money. People have no jobs. They have no hope. They have no future. We got university students leaving university with no prospect of a job. And we can change it, we can fix it, but we're still talking about racial politics. You know, who's white, who's black.
All right.
It's really got to end.
Let's hear then from Mr. Peterson from the Khoisan Party. Your thoughts on this?
No, we as coloureds, so-called coloureds, we are fed up. We are sick and tired of being represented by people who tends to care about us.
Who are those people? Let's get
the so-called white and so-called black people pretends that they are there and speaking on behalf of our people. There's a perception that we can't speak on behalf of ourselves, and we are sick and tired of that. That's why that is mostly part of the reasons why we establish the party.
So I want to look at policies that are in place, both nationally and provincially, that speak to black people. Do you see yourself as part of that specification of the demographics of this country?
You know, at first we were classified as coloureds. We were not born as coloureds. Our ancestors was born with a specific identity. In the 1950s, Act 30, the then National Party came and classified us as coloureds, which means that they took all our 5 nations, take them as one, and classified us as coloureds. In fact, we are proud who we are, and we actually now we stand up for identity. And the unfortunately both governments,
okay.
So
is that why you didn't want
the ANC and NDA failed the coloured communities?
Is that why you didn't want the airport to be renamed Winnie Madikizela
Exactly.
Mandela Airport? Okay, let's get the closing arguments from all of the parties, and we'll start with Al Jama Party. Let's take a quick break and then we'll come back to hear your thoughts on agrarian land reform and just even looking at the environmental economies, maritime economies, who's benefiting and what needs to change. Let's take a quick break and we'll be back shortly.
Thank you very much, and let's take a look at those conditions that we're expecting over the country for tonight and for tomorrow. Starting off, we have a low pressure system sitting over that interior of the Northern Cape, causing some instability over the central parts of the country and also over that eastern side of the country, causing this 30% to 60% chance of showers and thunder showers over the central interior, scattered over that interior of the northwest for tonight. And tomorrow we have the scattered showers over that interior of Limpopo, extending to the northern parts of Gauteng and also over that western part of Mpumalanga. Morning fog patches also expected over that escarpment of Limpopo, extending into Mpumalanga in the interior of KwaZulu-Natal and also over that southern parts of Gauteng for tomorrow. Poor visibility is a possibility over those areas. We also see those fog patches along the southern coastline of the country and also over that western interior of the country for tomorrow. So please be on the lookout over those areas. Now looking at our watch, we have severe thunderstorm watch over that eastern parts of the Northern Cape and also over that western part of the northwest, extending into that extreme western part of Free State. Possibility of heavy downpours over those areas. And tomorrow we have a runaway fire warning over that interior of the Northern Cape, extending into that extreme northern parts of the Western Cape. So please be on the lookout. Do not start any unnecessary fire over those areas. Cold temperatures expected over South Africa, with Sutherland expecting a low of 8. Cape Town can expect a minimum of 12, with Pretoria seeing a low of 14. 15 is your minimum in Polokwane with a maximum of 27. Still experiencing some warm temperatures over Appleton with a maximum of 34. The Mother City peaking at 36. Durban is expecting a maximum of 27. That's all the weather I have for you. Good night.
It's all things gangster and power in the kingdom of Kwamashu as two families immerse in the contradictory world of church and crime. Uzalo, weekdays at 8:30 p.m. on SABC 1. Mzansi, for sure.
It's not about xenophobia.
There are many issues of service delivery, housing, illegal mushrooming of structures.
They are now starting to move to Sandton and to submit a memorandum.
You're not going with tires there. That's all. I will stop this march here.
When we're burning tires in the inner Alexandra, they kept quiet because now we are going where they report. That is why they are having a problem.
We feel really undermined and disrespected that he did not show up to listen to our grievances. He has grown a tendency of only serving the so-called white monopoly capital and has forgotten about black communities. Development must happen either or of all sides because we are equally Batu.
But the people here today are saying service delivery to us, we deserve it.
All right, thanks a lot, Stephen. So let's continue the last 25 minutes of this discussion with the 7 parties who are joining us. Al Jamaa, ANC, Black First, Land First, Cape Party, DA, Green Party and the Khoisan Party. So just to take the discussion forward, we've been talking about the challenges that the city has been experiencing and its residents. But Al Jamaa, just in terms of your suggestions for agrarian and land reform in the Western Cape, I know that some of your community members have lamented the slow pace of being given land rights in places such as Khayelitsha. What are the problems that you're encountering and how do you believe that this could be resolved?
Look, I said earlier on that we feel that the position that land must be compensated without compensation is anti-revolutionary. And we feel that there should rather be reparations for the harm that has been done. And that those who benefited from stealing the land from the original inhabitants, which is the Khoi, and later the San joined them, and later the Malays joined them, and later the Bangladeshis joined them. They are the original owners of the land, and the land was stolen by the
So how far back would you go in determining where the period begins and reparations in what manner? If you're saying that there must be compensation.
Look, I would go back to the 16th century when the Portuguese and the Dutch and later the British started to colonize and occupy the land of the Khoi. And also our other brothers in Africa did the same. So they also caused a lot of harm by stealing the land from the Khoi. So our position is, the situation is so complicated that for the sake of unity and cohesion, that those who benefited from stealing the land must pay reparations. It was used against Japan, it was used against Germany, and it should also be used here.
Mr. Rasool, I'll take an example of the land dumped Mandela Farm, for instance. That has been seen as indicative of some of the problems that the Western Cape and the country in general faces. So these are people who are accusing the farm owners of trying to evict them but not allowing them access to land that they believe that they grew up in. But they say it's also because they are not recognized. as the ANC government in the past in the Western Cape, you would have to take some responsibility not only for the slow pace of land reform and redistribution, but what needs to change now?
Look, I think that certainly our biggest land challenge in the Western Cape is to integrate the spatial framework of the city and all our cities. You can't have a situation where the Binnendorp is white, the Buitendorp is coloured, and the outer dorp is black. I think we need spatial integration, and it's going to have to happen through the process of expropriation without compensation, starting with state land, going to state-owned enterprise land, and then going to underutilized land. That's the way that we're going to have to approach it, both from a perspective of some farm lands that need to be but mostly your inner city
But if you
areas.
are going to implement agrarian land reform...
More than that, you cannot have a system of gentrification like in the Boerkaap and Woodstock and so forth, where the blacks who are there are being driven out through high rates and all of those kind of forces. So we are going to need to be able to find a sustainable
solution. But you would also
solution.
have to know how much land is owned nationally, at a national level, how much land is in private hands, how much land is in the hands of international private entities, surely.
The last audit we did was that at that point about 30 billion rands worth of land was owned by one or other form of the state, mostly provincial and city government, and that's naturally where we have to start. And so when a Tafelberg school comes along and it offers domestics in Sea Point the opportunity to live close to work, we've got to grab it. We can't give it to the developers, and that is why the DA is beginning to get the name Developers Alliance. And the same thing with Skilpoek in Hermanus, the same thing with other pieces of land that are going to developers. And incidentally, the Khoisan burial and cremation grounds at the Liesbeek River is also up for development by the DA. And so we can't allow land already in government hands to be alienated to developers.
Okay, let's hear from you, Mr. Jama. The Western Cape farming community has been amongst the most affected by the indecision, some would say, on how to proceed with land reform or land redistribution in this country, and simply not putting enough money into their development. We're talking about roads, we're talking about schools, we're talking about hospitals, etc. But what are you proposing for the people of the Western Cape?
Thank you. As PLF, Black First Land First, we've said that the land must be expropriated without compensation, and ANC has failed to do that till today. Here in Eastern Cape, what we've noticed is that black people have been given farms. Those farms, they don't have water, and they want to make sure that black people are failing on those issues, because once you give someone a farm without water, then obviously that person will fail. So that's why they go around and say black people are failing on these issues. Same applies with the issue of the hospitals. The hospitals, we've been standing clearly on that issue, saying that we must change things. The president and everyone must use, and all the public servants must use these public services, and so that's
Mr. Miller, coming to you, are you aware of how much land is owned by private individuals or companies in the Western Cape? And I'm just asking a party that believes that you should self-determine. And would you lease land? Would the state own the land, or would you allow investment corporations to land grab, as they say?
Absolutely not. There is no land issue. This land issue is a political issue. It's a vote garnering issue. So we have 2.8 million hectares of land in possession of the ANC government. Recently there was a story in the news about the Beaconsfield farm. 2 ANC comrades got possession of this farm. Within 6 months, it was worth 100 million rand. Within 6 months, they had driven it into the ground. There is no land issue here. Land itself has no value. What you do with the land gives it value. So at the Cape Party, we are 100% opposed to expropriation without compensation.
So who owns the land? Does that not matter?
What matters is utilizing the land that we have to make it as productive as possible. We have got serious problems. We've got water issues. We've got electricity issues. The economy is beginning to spiral. We're in junk status. We could be pushed through to the next level. When the economy is that bad, petrol prices are so high, rates are so high, people are struggling to put food on the table. The last thing we should be doing is imposing communist policies that would destroy the economy, destroy our ability to feed ourselves. That's how we can live together harmoniously
so let me hear from
in
the
a true
DA.
rainbow nation.
The ANC goading here and calling you the Development Association, if I got that... Developers Alliance, as they call you. How do you respond to that? Is that your approach to the issue of land in this province?
Well, I would say it's completely untrue, and it would be as accurate as calling them another naughty comrade, because whenever there's opportunity, it's always a comrade who's getting that opportunity and taking it out of the hands of genuine beneficiaries. And we saw what happened at the Freda Dairy project, for example. It's ANC put themselves first and the people last. The truth of the matter is there's no government, provincial government in the country that's driving agricultural land reform harder than the Democratic Alliance. In the last 5 years, of 400 agricultural sites handed over to people, we have a 72% success rate in land reform projects and land reform support, leveraging over 80 million rand per year to give agricultural support to emerging black farmers who are land reform beneficiaries. This is the track record. It's a matter of fact.
But may I
this
ask
is
this
a government
question,
that's
though,
moving
Mr.
forward
Steenhuisen,
on land reform.
like
The
if we
ANC
look
talks
at the
about
case
land
of
reform.
Mandela
We
Farm,
do land reform.
If we look at the case of Mandela Farm, for instance, the protest arose out of the community there saying that chemical toilets that were already put in were actually taken out because
4.1 billion rand in the coming budget going towards ensuring that we upgrade informal settlements and we start helping out backyarders. We're the only city in the country that is providing electricity and water to backyard dwellers. This is a government that is making a real difference. The ANC talks about service delivery. The ANC talks about land reform. We're doing delivery.
Right.
We're doing
land
reform.
From Mr.
And we're doing it
Saul,
successfully.
What is your assessment of the progress, quote unquote, that has been made in
Sorry,
this?
I missed that word.
What is the progress, quote unquote, that has been made in this regard, especially with regards to the environment? And I want to look at the maritime industry. I know that the fisheries beneficiaries have complained a lot about how either the deals have been designed or how the land has been allocated, and obviously what comes out of the sea.
Sure. So at this precise moment, the ocean, worldwide is suffering from loss of oxygen, and it's caused primarily by the climate, the alteration in climate. But what you're seeing is massive declines in fish stocks. You're seeing overfishing happening all around our shores. The Navy, even though they've got this big Simonstown, these big battle cruisers or whatever they are, it's not really effective for keeping the Chinese out of our bays. At the same time, they penalize the actual communities, people that have, lived off the ocean for I don't know, maybe as long as the San have been around, they've been living off the oceans, and they penalize them by taking away licenses and granting it to larger.
Are any of these parties protecting those communities?
Excuse me?
Are any of these parties protecting those communities?
I don't see any, anybody that's sitting here that's protecting what is the actual source of the problem, which is the loss of fish stocks. I mean, right now, 4 years ago, we sued for them to bring about a change in the quotas granted to pick lobster out of the ocean. Right now they're talking about it being extinct. Had they listened to us just 4 years ago, you wouldn't have the extinction of species on your shore, but here you have it. Because they're so busy with politics as usual that they're missing an absolute declining climate happening all around them. And they talk about socio-economic development, they talk about growth, but there's nothing to grow into if there's no planet to grow on. If there's no ground that's not poisoned, you know, there's dildren and DDE in the soils right here surrounding the entire Western Cape. You know that when they pick crops up out of that soil, you can actually go to Pick and Pay, you can take a cucumber, you can sample it, and you'll find toxins, herbicides.
Okay, so let me hear from Mr. Peterson from the Khoisan Party. Your community has been greatly affected by this. What do they see are the challenges? Are they being listened to? Are they being given a seat at the table?
It is very shocking to hear from both ruling parties, national and provincial, that they acknowledge the fact, especially regarding to land, that the land belongs to the Khoisan. And the stealing of land does not exist from the 1600s. It comes from the 1400s when Bartolomeus Diaz, Vasco da Gama, when they arrived in the Southern Cape, the stealing already started there. Very unfortunately also is when the national government deals with the reclaim of land, they limited the time frame up until the 1913. And our claims is beyond that. Hence, we are still struggling to get that point together now. So, in order for us to get our land back. Now, with the new movement of the government in dealing out land, they're going to have another problem. If we succeed in our efforts to get our forefathers, our ancestors' land back. So, that is our challenges now. But let me also talk on the issue of land, because it seems that everybody's referring to agricultural land. When you drove through the suburbs, you'll find a lot of backyard pedal beaters, mechanics. What about industrial land? I mean, I don't know what does the governments have master plans for emerging businesses, but well, when you drive throughout the suburbs, you'll find a lot of cars along the streets. There's no place for those people to obtain that.
Right. Let's get closing arguments from the various political parties when we return right after the break. Don't go away.
When thinking about the hassle of switching medical aid, Tuli has an epiphany. Bonita's let her apply online and a human phones her back. No long forms, no on-hold music. That's real medical aid. Exciting.
Tandega, her weird family and cray-cray friends bring you another cheeky season.
Everything new, brand new. Well.
Into zamkele.
Thandeka bengikhuluma noMaziputhe efonini uthi ucela space bag. Ithembe mem, ha ke tshepe motho. Awe, nkampa ka tshepa lejwe. Yini? Size ukufunda la esikoleni, are you aware? Yeah.
Eyamugele. Catch Tandeka's Diary Mondays at 7:30 only on SABC 1 Mzansi for sure.
Stand by. And welcome back to our election debate here on the Sea Point Promenade here in the Western Cape, debating with Al Jama, ANC, Cape Party, BLF, Green Party, Khoisan Party revolution, the various issues that they believe are at the forefront of what will make the voters of the Western Cape choose them. So just to wrap up, I'm going to ask you in a minute each, what do you believe is the biggest threat to the Western Cape should any one political party or a coalition of parties win this election? Let's start with Aljama.
Well, the biggest threat to one party rule means that the voices of the diverse communities won't be heard. And if there is a coalition, it should not be dominated, but it should be a real multi-party government. And that's why Al-Jamaa hopes that it will have the balance of power if there is a coalition. It's a bit early days for us to be the ruling party, but if our constituency put their deen first and understand it's haram to vote for certain parties, we will definitely have
Who
the balance of power.
Who would it be haram to vote for?
Sorry?
Who would it be haram to vote for?
It will be haram to vote for those parties who have policies that is non-compliant with the deen, and that means the policies and that is derived from Islam.
Would you be more specific?
Well, for example, when it comes to socio-economic issues and the cause of it is, extending alcohol hours, for example, which causes more alcohol harm, our position is very strong that that is against not only Islam but the religious principles to make, for example, Cape Town is already the drunk capital of the world. To make the province the drunk province of South Africa is un-Islamic. That doesn't comply with our deen. So how can a Muslim vote for a party that wants to extend alcohol trading hours and make this the drunk province of South Africa?
And I just like to ask very quickly this question, because I'm going to ask Mr. Rasool to answer after you finish. Would you lend your support to the ANC? We had the ANC President Cyril Ramaphosa here wooing the Muslim community, as some said. Would you put your support with the ANC?
We have a quarrel with some of the ANC policies, but where it is compliant with the deen, we will support the ANC.
Okay. Mr. Rasool, let's have your final words on this. So what is the biggest threat to the Western Cape at this point? And do you think that one-party rule is the answer? Or should you improve your numbers to go into coalition?
Look, I think that the biggest threat to the Western Cape is the biggest threat to South Africa. And I want to say that no one says it more eloquently than Standard & Poor's, the rating agency, said it the other day. The ratings agency said that a victory for Cyril Ramaphosa has to happen if we want to double the growth rate to 1.6%. And I don't have to explain how that will impact on jobs, and the Western Cape benefits disproportionately from the number of jobs that comes out of economic growth. In fact, Standard & Poor's goes further to say that the country is better off with a stable and strong ANC majority, so that the president does not have to look over his shoulder, and says that the best case scenario is a strong mandate for reform, because that is what Cyril Ramaphosa guarantees. This is precisely the case.
Does a change in an individual mean a change, the base change in the party?
I think that we've had an individual who may have caused more damage, and therefore an individual can correct it. And that is what Standard & Poor's says, that a reform agenda is absolutely crucial for this country to reach its potential. And I think that it is that makes, for example, 110 Afrikaner leaders from all diverse communities come together to endorse that view that we need a strong president with a reform agenda.
Should you need a kingmaker, who would you choose?
Look, I don't think it's a matter of choosing. I think that the ANC in the Western Cape is used to coalitions. We've managed complex ones based largely on strategic principled positions on how we can best serve our constituencies.
Would it include the Black First Land First Party?
If they're a junior partner.
Okay. Let's find out from the Black First, Land First party. Would you look at the ANC as an attractive party? Do you believe that they are part of the problem? Are they part of the threat to the Western Cape?
On our side, as Black First, Land First, firstly, we are not on provincial in the Western Cape, and we've been saying that we would prefer that people, instead of voting for DA, they should vote for ANC. ANC policies, they also talk to us as BLF. For example, we believe that if a DA can be moved in the Western Cape, our people that are farming on the backyards, our people that, for example, currently in the Western Cape, the top management it's white people, the middle management it's white people. The lower management, that's where you'll find coloureds, Indians, and blacks. Should the DA stop to govern this city, I believe things will change. Our people are not growing, whether you are educated or you are educated. Okay. They are not growing. So that's why you are saying that let us sign the expropriation of land without compensation and support our people on farming.
Let's hear from the Cape Party. Jack Miller, are you considering yourself as a friend of anybody on this panel? Should you get a significant number of votes, would you be in a coalition with the Democratic Alliance or the ANC or Al Jamaa?
We take our mandate from the people, and you asked what the biggest threat is in the Western Cape, and it's the biggest threat in the country too. Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely, and the problem in the Western Cape is that the DA has had absolute power for the last decade. The problem with the country is that the ANC has had absolute power for the last 25 years. What we want to do is hold the DA here in the Western Cape to account. We've always said we're open to negotiation, but the principles of that negotiation will be based upon putting the interests of the people of the Cape first. The Cape Party believes in devolving power down to local communities through a system called direct democracy. And
what would that entail? Would the people directly choose their leaders, their councillors, etc., their premier?
100%, absolutely. You know, one of the problems is, like in Durbanville, Patricia de Lille forced a cell phone tower to be put up in a community that did not want it. That community came to us. We had to fight the DA in court to win this issue. The DA should not have the authority to put cell phone towers up in our communities. What we want is grassroots democracy. Let wards decide what is in their best interest. Let communities decide what is in their best interest. If it's a majority Muslim ward, let that ward follow the laws that Muslim community. If it's a majority Christian ward, so on and so forth. Let the people govern from the ground up.
Let's hear how John Steenhuisen responds to that. Let the people govern. Do you see that translating into an absolute victory for the DA? And how do you respond to the fact that that may be the biggest threat to the Western Cape?
No, absolutely. The biggest threat to the Western Cape is by smaller parties letting the ANC and the EFF and BLF, who we've seen endorse the ANC this evening, in through the back door and into the levers of power here in the Western Cape. That is the biggest threat to the people of the Western Cape. We have a record of action. We've got a promise of more. We've delivered on our promises. We've brought clean and accountable government to the Western Cape, which has shown the citizens of this province that life gets better where you have clean, accountable government.
And who's your coalition partner, Mr. Steenhuisen?
Well, we want to go out there and go out there and get everything that we can in terms of getting a majority. And it's not true what Mr. Miller says, that we have absolute control. We have a provincial legislature with a number of parties who have done a good job, I think, of holding the DA accountable here in the Western Cape.
What is the biggest threat to the Western Cape at the moment, and who would you endorse?
So it's basically, you know, very little is actually going to change by voting for pretty much anybody on this group, whether you vote for the DA, whether you vote for the ANC. It's pretty much going to be the same day. You're going to wake up, you're still going to be living as a backyard dweller. There's very little alteration that's going to significantly change your trajectory. And what you actually need is a form of radicalism that is applied to the way that we are doing business here as a people. And we need to sort of come back to the principle where we are not ruled by who we put in power. They are actual public servants.
Okay. All right. Let's hear from the Khoisan Party. Very final word from you, Mr. Peterson. What's the biggest threat and who would you go into bed with?
We think that the biggest challenge or biggest problem would be to allow the two majority parties to govern this province based on political struggles and economical struggles.
Who would that be?
I mean, you could hear that both the DA and the ANC is fighting for power over the province, and that would be the biggest mistake, because that will neglect service delivery. It will neglect addressing basic issues.
In a yes or no answer, is it time for the smaller parties to go into coalition and govern the Western Cape?
Of course,
all right.
Of course, and that is why we are standing for.
Thank you very much to all of the panelists today. Al-Jamah Khanif Hendricks, ANC's Ibrahim Rasool, Cape Party's Jack Miller, and PLF's Mawanda Chama. Thank you very much to the DA's John Steenhuisen, Green Party's Jason Soul, Khoisan Revolutionary Party Cornelius Peterson. Thank you very much to the panelists for braving the nippy weather and having this discussion with us here on Full View. Stephen, it's back to you in the studio.